All right, well, welcome to our very first Lunch and Learn today. We are going to be trying something new. Our hope is that these Lunch and Learn sessions from Virginia Affairs will become quarterly hour-long sessions where we focus on a variety of topics that are relevant to the Foundation's work, whether that's value-added agricultural enterprise opportunities, business development, cooperative development strategies, and the like. Virginia Affairs is formerly known as the Virginia Foundation for Agriculture, Innovation, and Rural Sustainability. Virginia Affairs for short, since that's a mouthful if you say it all at once. Today's program is going to focus on the value-added producer grant. Before we jump into the VAPG program as it's formally known, I do want to give a nod to the services of Virginia Affairs. I'm Whitney Perkins. I'll be hosting today's session. I've worked with our foundation for 5 years now, and Virginia Affairs has a variety of strategies. We are focused mostly in value-added agriculture, which means a lot of things to a lot of folks. For us, it is any sort of business development opportunity that provides producers an opportunity to command a higher value for their product. We do that in a variety of ways. We have a number of focus areas. Our first is cooperative development strategies, so groups who want to form cooperative businesses to help bring higher revenue to their businesses. Business development, one-on-one business development. We do this through grant assistance, which we're going to speak to one of the grant programs we work in today. We do general enterprise research. We regularly publish white paper guides. You may have been familiar with our small volume red meat processing study that was rolled out in 2020 in the height of the COVID pandemic. We do feasibility studies, business plans, strategic planning, as well as just entrepreneurial workshops, seminars like this one. We also have a farm relief fund, and last year we launched a Agricultural Innovators Challenge, which is lovingly referred to as the Bullpen. So that is just a little bit about who we are and what we do. We serve a variety of audiences from farmers to local governments, and we work very closely with Virginia Farm Bureau. In fact, I'm a Virginia Farm Bureau employee, as well as we work with USDA, Rural Development, and our cooperative extension partners at both Virginia Tech and VSU. All right, so as we move forward into the value-added producer grant program, few things about this program. This presentation is going to be a very brief 50,000-foot overview of the value-added producer grant program, what it can and cannot do, and how you can begin to prepare your business to make application to this program. This is one of the many programs that Virginia Affairs specializes in. We serve as consultants to this program and help businesses make application to the program. We've worked in this program for 20 plus years. We typically have a high 90s success rate, and Virginia normally takes home 10% average of the national available funds year over year. So we're really proud of this work, and we feel like this is a great opportunity for a lot of producers. This program is administered by Rural Development. It is a nationally competitive grant fund that is funded through the Farm Bill, and the main purpose of this grant is to help farmers, keyword farmers, start and expand value-added producer-owned businesses. And we're going to talk a little bit more today about what that looks like. Who can make application to this program? Farmers, ranchers, fishermen, loggers, farmer-rancher co-ops, producer groups, and majority-controlled producer businesses. The biggest key to note here is that producers who own a farming operation or have a portion of who have ties to a farming operation, who produce and own more than 50% of the subject agricultural commodity. What does that mean? That means that if you are producing wine and the commodity to which you add value is grapes, 50% of the grapes being used in your wine, you must produce those grapes on your farming operation. That means if you have a goat dairy and maybe you're using that to make a lotion line, goat lotion line, the product that you're using in that line, 50% of that must come from goats that you raise, 50% of that. That means if you're a retail beef producer, 50% of the beef that you're slaughtering to go into those retail beef products must be raised on your farm. What's really important here is they want to see farmers, folks that have dirt underneath of their fingernails, who work out in the fields, who work with these animals, who work with these crops, are the ones who produce from start to finish a value-added product. They do not want to see contracted agricultural products, and you must maintain ownership from start to finish, which means at no point in this process must the sale of that commodity change hands from outside of the ownership of the business that's applying. Or there must be ownership in a farm and ownership in the value-added business at the end of the day. There is priority funding that's being given to veterans, beginning and socially disadvantaged farmers, small, medium family farms, and farmer cooperatives. That does not mean that you're guaranteed funding. This is a nationally competitive grant program. What it means is there's basically some paperwork that you fill out that certifies that you qualify in one of these categories, and we can talk about what those definitions are, and you receive extra points. And this is awarded on a points basis, so the more points that you're able to pick up through the application process, the closer to the top of the pile that your application is, and the more likely it is to get funded. What is value added? Inside of the value added producer grant, we recognize value added through a couple of different definitions. The two that we work the most in, and that almost all of our products and almost all of our clients qualify in, are local foods, which is commodities that are sold within state lines or within 400 miles. Or a change in physical state, so actually processing into grapes into wine, retail beef. If you have an on-farm kitchen and you're going to be making jams or jellies or selling maybe a sandwich that has your lettuce on it, once you've washed, cut, packed that's different than it not. You know, it can never go back to being its original state, can never go back to being on the hoof, that can never go back to being a grape. It's been crushed. It's had a change in physical state. They do recognize a couple of others produced in a manner that enhances the value. These are things like non-standard agricultural practices, like organic, grass-fed, free-range, etc., physical segregation. So these may be things like non-GMO, identity preserved. There is a renewable energy portion that does allow for some methane generation, biodiesel generation. It is important to note that wind, solar, and geothermal are excluded from this program. It is also important to note that a big hallmark of this program, the story that you're trying to tell, is I receive a higher value for my commodity because I sell it locally, because I sell retail beef instead of just dropping my cattle off at the market and hoping that whoever showed up today is buying what I'm selling. Because I go through this process, I command a higher value for my commodity. You are going to need to provide some information around why, and we're going to talk to that in a few minutes. It is important to note that you can come back to this program, but you cannot come back for the exact same product. So for example, and we've seen this happen before, maybe you're a local vegetable producer and you come to this grant and you receive a grant to expand your local food sales. And so that may be through direct sales to customers through a CSA, farm market stand, selling that to restaurants, wholesaling that, and the like. Maybe in a few years after you've grown that line of business, you decide, I'm going to start an on-farm kitchen, and I'm going to take the lettuce that I was selling directly to a consumer, and I'm now going to wash it and chop it and package it as a salad, as a ready-to-eat product. So that would now be the difference between local foods and a change in physical state application. So in that particular example, your commodity may have been the same, lettuce, but the methodology was different. You have a different target audience, a different target market, a different price point for those products. All right, we're going to talk about types of VAPG grants. The Value-Added Producer Grant has two types of grants that you can apply for. The first is a planning grant. This has a $75,000 max award, and you have 1 year to spend the funds. This is the grant that pays for documents like a business plan, a feasibility study, a marketing plan, and the like. Projects that we often see use a planning grant are going to be, maybe it's a traditional dairy who sells fluid milk and says, you know what, my milk check's not cutting it. I really want to start an on-farm creamery, and I want to have a milk line and ice cream shop. So I'm now transitioning my business to this value-added product. But what is that going to take? And I need some documentation around what's that going to take. If I'm going to build an on-farm creamery, that's going to cost me a lot of money, and I need some documents to take to the bank to access some capital. That's a planning grant. Working capital grants are what I like to say, pay for the fun stuff. So these have a award max of $250,000, and you can spend funds for up to 3 years. We recognize working capital grants in basically two tiers, a less than $50,000 grant, and then a greater than $50,000 to $250,000 grant. What does it pay for? It pays for post-harvest activities. That means things like direct processing, marketing, travel expenses to market, small supplies like packaging, labeling, non-family labor, utilities, credit card fees, farmers market fees. We could probably spend an hour reviewing types of expenses that you can put in this program. What's important to note is production expenses are not eligible. So anything that's happening on the farm to get that product grown is ineligible. But from the moment that you harvest that product, from the moment that you take it off the vine, from the moment you drop it at the processing facility, those costs forward, making it into the value-added product, everything that goes into that is now an eligible expense. We have worked with projects from retail beef, lamb, and pork, wine, honey, maple syrup, lavender, creameries, herbs, on-farm kitchens, beauty products, aquaculture products, fresh fruits and vegetables, you name it. We've seen and worked with a variety of commodities that qualify in this program. And what you are trying to say, the story that you're trying to build is, I'm going to use these funds to grow my target market. I have a plan. I'm going there in probably 5 to 8 years. But if you can infuse this working capital into my business at this critical juncture where I'm in this high intensity growth phase, I'm going to reach that point in 2 years. I'm going to reach those target sales in 3 years, not 5 or 8 years. And so I'm going to go there, and I'm going to go there whether you infuse the capital or not. I'm in a growth strategy mindset. So this is meant to basically be short-term infusion of capital to help offset a lot of that investment and marketing, which are really expensive, but also take time to build that customer base up to support those projects. Very financially minded. It is important to note, and I will mention this multiple times in this program, if you apply for more than $50,000, you will need a business plan. If you do not have 2 years of sales of the value-added product, you are going to need a feasibility study and a business plan to accompany your grant application. So I'm gonna mention that again, but please note there will be additional paperwork depending on which tier of these grants you fall in. Some more important details to consider. Ineligible expenses, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, payment to owners. So paying yourself is not eligible. You can use your time as in-kind match, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. Machinery is ineligible. Building buildings, any sort of research and development, any kind of production costs, engineering, lobbying, all of these are going to be considered ineligible expenses. This is focused directly on the production and marketing of your value-added product. So what does it take to get a grape into a bottle of wine and into a customer's hand? Not the building that you're selling that in, not the harvest equipment, not the production of those grapes. I'm very focused on that piece from the time that we harvest it to the time that we get it into a customer's hand. This is a matching grant. So that means a $250,000 grant is a $500,000 project. Remember, this is over the course of 3 years or up to 3 years. It's really important to note that you are going to have to show what we call capacity to match 2 times. Once when you make application to the grant, and again when you accept your award. There are a variety of ways that you can do this, cash and in kind. So you can match a portion of this with your labor, with an owner's labor, with family labor, and the like. It is important to note cash is king. You can show this capacity through a variety of ways. These can be things like a retirement account, a 401k, a savings account, a business account, a line of credit, any combination thereof. We've had folks use up to 14 different sources to show that they have capacity to match. And I note this because it can be a lot to ask somebody 30 days within an application time frame to show $250,000 in the bank somewhere. I don't want you guys to get tripped up on this. Means that this does not mean that however you show those funds, it doesn't mean that you're going to spend the money out of the retirement account that you match with. What you're simply showing is that if you were to receive an award, you basically have funds to begin to start these projects. Nobody's going to come back and say, show me that you spent your funds out of your retirement account. They just want to see that you have the capacity to access those kinds of funds on your own. So that's what you're showing. It's important to note this is a reimbursement grant, which means when you're funded, you are not going to receive a $250,000 check from the federal government to spend at your leisure. What you are going to do is this money will be spent out of your operations account over the period of time. So at your leisure, you're going to submit reimbursement requests. What that looks like is once your grant becomes active, you can start incurring expenses. And maybe as a part of your grant, you said, I'm going to buy some bottles and I'm going to buy some barrels and I'm going to pay a marketing consultant and I need to pay 2 people to be in my tasting room or 2 people to deliver my oysters into my target markets or to set at the farmers markets for me and sell my product. So you're going to pay those folks. You're going to buy those bottles. You're going to buy those packages. And you're going to save those receipts. And then as you feel necessary and when you're ready to make a drawdown, you will take all those receipts, you submit them to USDA, and they're going to go, yep, each of these are eligible expenses that they've outlined. And let's say you have $50,000 of receipts that you spent in Q1, and all of them are eligible. They are then going to write you a check back for $25,000 of the $50,000 that you spent. So it's reimbursement based over the period of your grant, and you keep drawing down until you're out of funds or until your grant runs out. It's important to note this is not free money. You will have reporting requirements. So just keep that in mind. At least twice a year, you will be submitting written progress reports to USDA. This program, our state contact, is Laureate Tucker. So twice a year, you're going to have to submit to her a written report that says, here's how I'm doing. Here's what my business accomplished in the last 6 months. Here's the problems we've faced. Here's what we've spent our money on. Here's what we're looking to do. Here's why our sales have expanded way faster than we anticipated, or here's some issues we ran into that we're working through. So do keep in mind, this is not a take it to the bank and never look back. Some important details, some more important application details. Your applications need to focus on new customers, new products, or new geographic regions. So this is about starting and expanding a value-added business. So just selling to the same target group that you're already selling to without any growth strategy, that's really not a good story for this grant. You really need to be focused on capturing new customers, launching a new product line, or moving the current products or new products that you have into a new geographic region. And you can do that through the many methodologies that we spoke about before. This is a very substantial grant application. Last year's grant application was 50 pages blank before you even put in a single word. And there are going to be a lot of additional requirements. Requirements like letters of support and letters of commitment. So these need to be folks that use your business, buy your product, want to buy your product, want to buy more of your product. This is not a politically minded grant, so going to your congressman and asking them for a letter of support isn't really going to point you up unless that person is committing to buy product. Then focus your attention there. You're going to need to provide evidence that you are within good standing, that you have the legal authority to carry out the matters of your business. Third-party documentation. Remember, we talked about earlier in the presentation showing that you're commanding a higher value for your product. Well, we're going to have to document that, pull some statistics or some data around what is the value of my commodity if I were to sell it on the commodity market versus what price point am I commanding for it by having this value-added methodology. Third-party documentation in your budget. If you said, I'm going to pay my farmer's market employee $12 an hour, do you currently employ somebody at that rate? Are you able to pull some information off of Bureau of Labor and Statistics that show that that's a reasonable price to pay for that service? Working capital applications. So the folks that are applying for what I would call the fun money, the post-production money. If you're applying for over $50,000, make sure you have that business plan or that feasibility study. There are priority points that we mentioned earlier, and there is paperwork that you'll have to fill out to show that you meet the criteria for those priority points. If you're an alcoholic-based project, or a hemp-based project, you are also going to need to show your licensure that shows that you're legal and following the regulations. And one other piece that's important to note before you get started, in order to apply, to be qualified to apply for this award, for this grant, you must have a UEI number, which is a unique entity ID. This is a completely free number that you get at sam.gov. Go directly to sam.gov. It takes about an hour. You can register yourself as a new entity. You go in, you input your business information, and you get a unique entity ID. This is the system that the federal government uses to pay its contractors. So this is the system that you will get essentially paid through once you submit your reimbursements. But you are not eligible if you don't have your UEI number. So make sure and don't delay. That system has a tendency to stop working the closer that you get to grants. So it does take about an hour, and we're happy to help walk you through that if you need help. Grant timeline. So we've talked about the basics of the grant. It's a lot of information to digest, and those are just the big program highlights. There are a lot of nuances to this program, as there are with every program. Every program is different. They need a different story. They have different eligible and ineligible expenses. But the timeline for this program, this is our projection for the 2023 cycle. So I cannot guarantee you that this is what will happen. The value-added producer grant program is not tied to a fiscal cycle, which means it opens and closes at the leisure of the federal government. It is not tied every year to a certain time frame that it does open and close. We've had this program open and close in spring. We've had it open and close in the fall, in the winter, and any time in between. This year, if the program sticks to what has happened the last 3 years, we anticipate it opening February to May, sometime in that timeline. The application cycle is typically a 60 to 90-day application window, and we will not know how much time we have to apply until the program is released. This is a historically slow-moving grant, so you are not going to submit this and within a week know if you've been awarded or not. If the timeline opens February and closes in May, a typical time frame would be that you'd receive an award announcement in mid-September. And once you receive your award announcement, welcome to the federal government. We'll have lots of paperwork to fill out. So even though you'll have a period of time where you may know that you've been awarded, you may not begin to spend grant funds. Nothing is officially official until all the right signatures hit all the right documents and all the right timelines. So make sure, if you apply this cycle, you're probably looking at October before you're going to begin to spend funds. And that will be absolutely contingent on your paperwork. Again, this is our projection. I cannot guarantee that this is the cycle. This is a very hefty application. I've already talked for 30 minutes just about what you can and can't do inside of the program. 50 pages before you download and put in any of your information. So the biggest take-home message is start early and do not delay. Virginia Affairs works with this program very closely, and I will tell you, we work year-round to make application to this program, and that our ideal spot is that when there's a program announcement, we're going back to our clients, we're going back into the paperwork that we've put together, and we're basically just brushing it up. We're taking maybe any new rules or guidelines that they've published. We're making sure that we meet the mark. We're going through and we're cleaning it up, because if you are starting to write for this program when the program opens, you are behind. You will have a big lift ahead of you, and that's not to scare you off. That is simply to to just have a moment of reality where we recognize that this is a lot of work and it takes a lot of time. Our process, the first step is to meet with our staff to discuss your eligibility. We normally we'll talk a little bit about where your current business is, what your planned growth model is, what our application assistance looks like, specific project needs. Once we have that meeting and you talk with us and we do a sit down, we have a client questionnaire that you return where we are capturing all of that information. Once you return our client questionnaire, we will issue you a client contract that you sign it and we sign it. There is a down payment that's due when you sign that, and that's when we begin writing. This is a very iterative process. There will be a lot of questions. There will be a lot of back and forth. A lot of you will be tired of hearing from us probably by the time that you're done. But that's really what it takes to get these applications funded and to put forth a really good project. Our services, we serve as basically ghostwriters for this program. So we help you write the grant application and any accompanying documentation that you may need to have, like those business plans and feasibility studies that we spoke about earlier. And then we support you from submission to award and through reimbursement, through the reimbursement process. So we are here start to finish to help you through, to help you understand. We do have a fee for service, which is 1% of your grant request and 25% of any additional documentation. So that would be the business plan, the feasibility study that I spoke of earlier. It is important to note we cannot guarantee you funding. This is federally administrated and it goes to a committee that reviews awards. I can't guarantee you that you will be funded, but as I mentioned earlier, we've worked with the program for over 20 years now. We have a high 90% success rate. At least 10% of the national pot normally comes home to Virginia. And for applications that are unfunded, we do work very closely with you through the next cycle to take reviewer comments and put forth a stronger application and hope you get funded. We have had success when we go back, getting those applications through the process. All right. And so with that, that's our contact information, and I want to open the floor for questions. It was a lot of information to digest all at once, and I'm going to leave this up for just a few minutes, let you guys write that down. Please check out our website. Do remember you are muted. So if you have a question, now is the time. No questions. I know I didn't do that great.
Whitney, my name is Stan Joins, and I'm with Valley Road Vineyards out in Afton. Thank you for this presentation. One big question for me is if it's, I see the things that are excluded in terms of things that, by way of equipment and the like, that would support the actual agricultural growing of the product. But when you say that land and building equipment, that sort of thing is ineligible, does that mean that the facility where you would take your, in our case, grapes, but after you've harvested them and turn them into wine in a winery, does that mean that the equipment, the building, the land, whatever associated with the wine production facility is also excluded, or is that possibly in part eligible for a grant?
That's a great question, Stan. It is certainly a loaded one. It can be in part eligible. There are going to be several key pieces. So any piece of equipment that's over $5,000. So when I say $5,000, what I really mean is $4,999.99 is ineligible. So if you have some smaller specialty equipment and it can be used that is under that $5,000 threshold, that will be eligible. When it comes to buildings, constructing the building, like constructing your winery facility, that's not going to be eligible. Paying for your electric bill in your winery facility, that very well may be eligible. If, let's say, your winery facility is rented, for example, here's an example of something that we've had previously. If you don't have ownership in the building, let's say you have a wine shop on Main Street that you're selling your wine in, and you're leasing that building, and you don't own it, you're leasing that building, that may be eligible as rent, as long as you're not leasing it to yourself. So you can't have, there's no payment to owner allowed in any manner. So it can get very gray what can and can't be included. For example, like wineries, bottles, barrels, labels, your tasting room labor, credit card fees, all of those are eligible.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. And I'll say that is, Stan had a great question, and I don't want to overspeak and say, oh, every expense that you have that goes into producing your value-added product is going to be eligible. The best thing for you to do is to sit down and ask. If you have an expense that you would like to have included, ask us. You know, we're happy to go through and give guidance around why or why not that expense is or isn't eligible. It's important that you really stick to expenses that are directly tied to taking your value added, your commodity, and turning it into an end product, value added product. So stick into that vein, but that's not to say that there may not be expenses that you have that are eligible, and you would be surprised at what we can get to work inside of the program. But don't be afraid if you've got expenses to ask about them. Other questions? None? Really? I do see that Laureate is on the call. And so, Laureate, I don't know if you want to just say a few words to the crowd. Laureate is our program administrator for the Value Added Producer Grant. So she can tell you if I did a good job or a not good job describing the program. But Laureate, I don't know if you have any comments to add.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Whitney. I don't have any comments to add. I thought you did a great job, and I guess that's indicative of not having any questions. But I'd just like to put out there that I'm available to answer any questions also that any of you may have for the Value Added Producer Grant Program. Whitney was pretty much on point with the publishing of the NOFA that opens up this program. We have been told that an announcement should be coming out sometime early next month, which I guess is technically next week. So we're looking for something in the next couple of weeks, and applicants will have a 90-day application window. I would just say that when you're formulating your application with Virginia Fairs and thinking about the expenses that you are looking to expend grant and matching funds on, please think about that carefully. As Whitney said, this process for this particular program is long. So if you're putting in an application in May, you probably won't know that you've been approved until maybe September. And then there is additional paperwork. So a lot of these grants will not start until October 1st or after. So kind of think out what may be happening in October as opposed to February when you're putting in your request. And I only say that because once the grant's been approved and you're looking to get reimbursed for your expenses, I'm seeing more and more that, hey, we need to now purchase this, or hey, we need to now buy this. And these are competitive grants, so they are approved and scored based on what's in that application. And so it's not really favorably looked upon to make changes after the grant has been approved, because that could have been the difference in a score. So I just like to encourage you to kind of think down the road with the expenses that you will be intending to use the grant for. And I think that's all. Whitney, Elijah, Tony, and all of you guys, thank you so very much for making this program in Virginia just a great program and getting funds out to our grantees and businesses. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Laureate. It certainly wouldn't be possible without your guidance. We lean on Laureate quite often. She helps us if folks submit a question about an expense that we're not sure how USDA may view the expense. We work very closely with Laureate. She is great. And if you do have questions about the program, she is really the gatekeeper for Virginia. And so if you are awarded a grant, Laureate is who you will work with directly to submit your reimbursement request, and who is basically going to get the final say in what will and will not be allowed. So it's important to note and to develop a good relationship with Laureate in this process. All right, other questions? One last call. If not, anybody? One last call? Nope. All right. Hearing none. Thank you all for taking time today out of Friday and joining us. Like I said, this session has been recorded and will be uploaded to the Virginia Fairs website. So if you'd like to go back and listen, please feel free. Also, I encourage all of you all, if you have questions about the program, please reach out to myself. As Laureate mentioned, Tony Banks and Elijah Griles also work on these programs, and we are happy to take your call, happy to answer any questions you may have, and we are here to help and assist you through this process. So please don't hesitate if you have questions about this program or other programs that producers might be able to access. We are here, we are ready to help, and we appreciate your time today. So thanks for joining us.